All right, we are live with another episode of the Rock Fantasy Files. I believe this is the 20th episode, and we don't have a rock star tonight. We're going pinball edition of the Rock Fantasy Files, and I have Tim Sexton here, who works for Stern Pinball. He's one of the guys that's kind of getting us working on some of these great new creations that we have at Rock Fantasy and across the United States and the world with pinball. Tim, how you
Yeah,
doing?
I'm doing great. I'm happy that a lot of the awesome pinball collection you have at Rock Fantasy, I've had a part in making some of that stuff work and making it come to life. So it's awesome
Cool.
to see all the people enjoying pinball, especially in these times. People are playing it at home and people are coming up with creative ways to
Yes,
play safely, play strong is our campaign. So it's nice to see pinball still going.
we actually, even though we're limited with Rock Fantasy, we're open now, and pinball showroom. You can go look around at the games and whatnot. What else? We're scheduled to do a thing with Stern next week on a Friday night through a moto down in with Marco and everything with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles launch. So that's supposed to be. I don't have a real strong date on that, but I think it's in about a week or so. So hopefully that works out. But Tim, the question for you is, what got you into pinball in the first place? I mean, how did you discover pinball? Because even though you work for Stern now, let people know that you are and were a fan and was a fan of pinball and played pinball before you actually got a job. So you didn't discover pinball by getting a job with Stern Pinball.
Right. Yeah. So before Stern Pinball, I discovered pinball when I was in college, which is a common story for a lot of people, going
Sure.
to the arcades and stuff. But you got to remember, though, that for a long time, pinball was really hard to find. It wasn't until the past few years that you'd have a lot of places to play. You had your, a few spots like Rock Fantasy holding it down. But when I
Yeah.
was in Chester County, Pennsylvania, growing up, we didn't have arcades. The mall arcade went out of business and then they
Sure.
switched it over to whatever, and there wasn't any pinball to play. But finally, when I was in college, I got to play at this place at Penn State called Chronic Town, which is like a hookah bar and a
Okay.
record shop, and it had a couple pinball machines. So had like the music and the pinball connection we talked about. And when I
Yeah.
went home for the summer, I played at the Pinball Gallery in Malvern,
Of
Pennsylvania.
course. Yeah. Bill Disney, right?
Yeah, with Bill, and I actually worked. I had an internship where Bill used to work before he retired at Unisys one summer. So it was funny to see him there, and then went over to his pinball place that night. I didn't even realize we were working right down the hallway from each other.
That's
But
cool.
when I was old enough to understand that it wasn't just, flipping the flippers and it was like a strategy thing and
Sure.
using the internet, I was able to find like, oh, look at all these places you can play, look at all these tournaments. I went up to Allentown with the trade show in Pennsylvania. And when I went to school, I played once a week maybe, but once I graduated and I had my first job up at IBM in New York, then I started going to Rock Fantasy and traveling to a bunch of other
Sure.
tournaments.
Yeah, I remember were you working for IBM was when you used to be a part of Rock Fantasy a lot.
Yeah, so working at IBM up there in the Hudson Valley, there was nothing really right there, so I'd go over to Rock Fantasy about an hour away and do the
True.
Orange County Pinball Club events. And then the only other place I could get to was like the Sanctum, unless I wanted
Sure.
to go all the way to New York City.
Sanctum's awesome.
Yeah, Sanctum on Monday nights, Rock Fantasy on Thursday nights. It was a lot of driving when I lived up there.
Yeah, the
And
Sanctum from where you were in Newburgh is probably about an hour and a half, right? Or like
yeah,
to get
each
to,
way.
yeah.
But I
So
loved it. I once I realized it was something you could get good at, and I really loved going and traveling to the tournaments and
sure.
getting better and meeting all the people. A lot of great people play pinball, and then just helping it grow. It feels like it's kind of a new era for pinball now. It gets categorized as this old thing among young people, but when I could bring in young people to go like, no, it's a state of the art, kind of one of a kind, all American game with
It is.
all this great lights, great sounds, great music, everything. It's a lot
And
of
it's
fun.
And definitely, and after we talk pinball, I mean, you can talk about the latest creations from Stern, where you work, and of course, now, like as pinball's gotten bigger, there's some other companies that are making pinball now, and then and pinball. I mean, you can get into pinball and like the new stuff, or you can be a guy that just likes the old 1960s and 70s games. I mean, pinball's got so many varying interests of, there's guys that play competitively like you did before you started working at the factory. And then there's other people that just collect pinball. There's some people that just like restoring them or collecting too.
Yeah, there's a lot of aspects to it, and it's cool that you have these things that especially working at Stern now, I feel like it's awesome that we're making something that's going to last a really long time, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people are going to get to experience it, and it might have a 50-year lifespan where people are still, it's going to feel old one day to get the brand new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Stern game, and people are going to
Yeah, yeah,
restore
yeah.
them and keep collecting and be like, oh, this is a classic, even though now it's the state of the art game.
Yeah, 1980s, like 100 years ago now. So, yeah, I mean, and then when you were around Rock Fantasy, you helped me out quite a bit with running some of the tournaments, correct?
Yeah, that was, we would do the Thursday night, the Stern Army,
Stern
Rock
Armies, yeah.
Fantasy stuff,
And we had
and
Rock Fantasy Pinball League too, where before we did Stern Army, I believe, and then of course we used to have the launch tournaments when a new game would come out, and we still do.
yeah, you always
Right
did
now we
every
don't.
season, the Rock Fantasy winter, spring, summer, and fall opens, which I
Yes,
think I
yes,
helped
we
out with
do
those
have
too.
that,
Yeah.
and yeah, we had a lot of good times in the old location. We moved the shop. You haven't been to the new shop since I moved in the winter or fall winter of 2019 and in November, and of course then we were open for a couple of months and it was doing super. And then we have the shutdown with the pandemic right now, and we're back open again now, and things are starting to turn around a little bit, but who knows? It's like you said in a conversation we had a few weeks ago. It's a roller coaster. It's up and down with the virus. You just don't know the future much. So we take it day by day.
Yeah, you just hope that everyone can stay safe because that is the most important.
Yes.
And, we all want to get through this, of course, and get to the other side. We know that there will be another side. We just don't know what it looks like. But I think if we all take it day by day and, everyone looks out for each other and stays safe, I think we'll get there and it won't be so bad.
So when you were at Rock Fantasy, I remember one day you came up to me and you said, you know what, I got an offer to work and possibly work with Stern Pinball. And you were kind of, deciding what to do with your life because you worked at IBM. And how did all that work out? Now you're there at Stern and you left us. I remember we even had a farewell tournament for Tim going away. But now, what do you do at Stern? Let's fill people in because there's a lot of people watching this that might not even know about pinball. But what goes into building a pinball, and what's your part in doing that?
So it's a lot of questions. I'll start first. I'll just say I'm a game developer at Stern. And so I do the game software development. That means I write the code. I write C++ code is basically my day-to-day job. And that's, the language that the computer understands so it can, play a light show at a certain time or make this award a certain number of points or, play this video clip or do this sort of animation. So it's all those little pieces that go into the whole game experience that I'm working on. But I'll talk about how I got into it. So first job out of college, I graduated from Penn State, and I had a degree in computer science, which, it's a big field right now, software development. A lot of places, it's in high demand for people to work in software development. And of course, now I'm working from home, but I could do my job on a computer, and I've got, a game back here that I can develop things on. So it hasn't been a crazy transition for me.
Okay.
IBM was the same thing. I'm working on a computer, I'm doing software development. I'm up in Poughkeepsie. And I'd been there for about 3 years, and I was at the point where I was saying, like, I kind of see how this is going, and I just kind of want to know what else is out there in the world. So maybe it might be worth taking a leap and going to some other industry, some other
Mm-hmm.
job, just to know, like, is this something I want to do, or do I want to do something else? And at
Sure.
that time, unknown to me, when I was contemplating this, Stern was expanding. Stern's been growing a bunch over the past few years, and we've
Sure.
added a lot of new people. And some people that we added before myself were Keith Elwin and Zach Sharp, who were two really top tournament players
Sure.
who knew me from going to tournaments and other things like podcasts and stuff. And Zach was the one who I played in a tournament with, and I let him know that, oh, I'm a software developer. That's what I do. And a couple weeks later, I hear from him back. He's like, "Hey, you have a resume you want to send over our way?"
Yeah.
So it just happened that conversation happened right when I think George Gomez, who's my boss now, and he's the chief creative officer and executive vice president of game development at Stern.
Yes.
He was saying, "Hey, we need some new people in here. If anyone knows anyone, reach out." So sent my resume over, and I had a phone interview with people like Dwight Sullivan, who's been a pinball game developer for a long time,
Yes.
and Tanyo Kleiss, who's been working at Stern for a long time. He's a game developer. Mark Guidarelli, who's our systems guy. Mark Wayna, who is the executive producer at Stern, and possibly some other people just on the phone asking me about pinball, asking me about software, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they flew me out to Chicago around December 2017 to interview on site. And
Yeah.
George took me around the whole entire factory, and we have a 110,000 square foot facility where we make all the games, and it's great to see. And he was talking about how everything's made in the U.S. Over 90% of our vendors are American. It's a really like American-made product
Yeah.
that's built and assembled and shipped out of the United States. So it's awesome to see just a factory working like that.
Yes.
But also talking to a lot of the engineering team, the multidiscipline engineering team we have. We have mechanical engineers, we have electrical engineers, we have a whole team of artists, 2D artists, 3D artists, 2D being like, the side of the cabinet. And I guess 3D, we kind of talk about the display,
Yes.
but it's, the graphics and stuff like that on the games. So ton of people behind the scenes talking to me, got familiar with a lot of people. And Stern offered me a position, and at the time it was like right around Christmas, and
Mhm.
I was, contemplating it and like, is this worth it? And I think I went to Rock Fantasy one day and I had mentioned that I had this offer from Stern, and one of the regulars to the Orange County and Rock Fantasy events was Howard. He's like, "Are you kidding me? You're not going to take this opportunity?" I'm like,
I
"Yeah, you're
remember
right.
that.
This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. What am I thinking?"
And then
So
being able to work in something you're passionate about too, it makes a big difference in life, I think.
yeah. Oh, of course. It's nice to be like really self-motivated about the stuff you do at work, and I think that describes a lot of people who work at Stern. Like, we're a group of people who are there because we want to make cool stuff. We want to make cool pinball machines, and being
Yeah,
at
yeah,
Stern gives us that opportunity.
yeah.
So around February 2018 is when I started. So I put in like a 2 weeks notice with IBM. My boss was caught off guard, but what they knew it was like a pinball related thing, and then when they realized it was Stern, they like couldn't really argue. They're like, "Well, there's no way Tim's gonna be convinced to stay here." So they understood and they wished me well. And I was off to Chicago. I got a place in the middle of the winter, this place here. Um,
Okay.
and I've been here for about 2.5 years now, working at Stern Pinball.
Yeah. Cool.
So that's how I got there. And
Yep,
then a
yep.
lot has happened since I've been here. I can go into that.
Yeah, why not? Let's talk about some of the games you've worked on and whatnot, or what the first game you did work on was, and all that kind of stuff. I guess whatever you like to do.
Yeah, so I'll give a little background. Stern releases 3 cornerstone games a year. And those are games where we have the Pro, the Premium, and the Limited Edition.
Yeah.
And these are like our 3 big projects we do every year in game development. And the Pro is, it's it's easier to operate, put it on location model.
Yes.
And then the premium is targeted to, the enthusiast who wants to put it at home. But a lot of people operate the premium models as well. It usually has
Yes.
a little more with mechanisms and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the limited edition is for the collector.
Yes.
That's usually a limited run of games with a special art package signed by the designer, has all the collectability associated with the limitedness of it.
Yeah.
And so we have 3 of those a year typically, and right before I got there was Iron Maiden was going to be the next cornerstone game we were releasing.
Okay.
So when I was in Chicago looking for an apartment, Keith Elwin, who's the designer for it, invited me to come in when I was in town, and I, signed some paperwork so I could go in and see what was going on.
Sure.
And he brings me to his office, and I see the whitewood of Iron Maiden. And we call it a whitewood. That's basically just means it's a piece of wood with no art on it. So it,
Sure.
It's blank. It's a whitewood. It's wood color, and you just see a bunch of inserts, and you could see like a yellow insert, a red insert. You don't really see all the other stuff that Zombie Yeti was going to put on there that say like, oh, this is, these are Eddie arrows and stuff like that. So you're kind of shooting it, and it's a little disorienting. Just seeing lights for the sake of lights and stuff, but he was explaining it to me, and I was kind of absorbing it and saying like, all right, this is going to be this, and this is going to be this. How does it feel? Shoot these shots. And he just wanted to watch someone shoot the game because he'd been staring at it for so long, and I was kind of the first chance he had to see someone new basically come in and shoot the game who, was at least like mediocre player. I could hit my shots after a couple tries or whatever. I'm not Keith Elwin, where he's the best pinball player of all time.
Yes.
But I was like, oh yeah, this is pretty cool. And talking with him on Facebook before I started, he's like, I think we can get you on our team to help with some stuff. And so I came in and started working on Iron Maiden. And I know they're one of your favorite bands.
I think they're a heavy metal. I think they're a heavy metal band, right?
Yeah, they're a super heavy metal band. And I was taunting you. I was saying I was going to do non-metal and non-rock music. And the first thing I do is Iron Maiden when I get there.
And I was kind of saying, well, if you do that, it'll help me save some money.
Right. And of course, immediately, every game we do, Keeler starts putting in his shop.
I've been pretty steady with Stern. I think I did miss one. I did not get Stranger Things, but I was moving my store, so that's probably why. Right. But I did go backwards, and I backtracked a few weeks ago, and I bought the Elvira.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And we have the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles when we got to reopen. I mean, I had to sell 10 games to survive this pandemic pretty much, not knowing what the future was. Of course, when we were first all locked down, just thinking, well, this is the end. We could be shut down for a year. I better get some capital. And, everything was kind of run tight from moving my business. And I said, well, I sold a few games. And then we reopened. I purchased a couple back.
Okay, well, I hope the Rock Fantasy Showroom survives, of course. It's a great place to play. Everyone who has the chance should get there, I think, and play. It's a great collection of pinball machines. And you don't just have all the Stern games. You have some classics, and you have a good collection, too. So
we got some Bally Williams. We've got some 1970s, like Dolly Parton and Evel Knievel and Kiss and Rolling Stones and the Fireball family.
Mm-hmm.
And a few others, yeah, definitely. So, Iron Maiden was the first game you got to work on,
right? And it came out probably. I think we launched it maybe 2 months after I started there. So I wasn't working on it for a long time, but Keith had a team, working with him of a bunch of new people to the company because we've been growing so much. So Rick Nagel was his lead software developer. He's an experienced game developer, but he wasn't necessarily a pinball guy, but he had been working at WMS prior. And then we had Harrison Drake, who's actually one of 2 people who's younger than I am who work in there. Okay. Actually, maybe Raymond might be younger than me. I'm not sure yet, but we were kind of the young guys who were just hired on board, and Harrison was his mechanical engineer, and he put together, a great game with Iron Maiden that works really well and everything. And
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was a long-awaited game for the metal community with Iron Maiden, for sure.
yeah, and so we were working. I came in with pinball knowledge, so it was easy, in some sense, for me to take, my work knowledge and my education knowledge of software development in C++ with my pinball knowledge and be able to work backward to go, what am I looking at here? Oh, this must be this thing that I'm familiar with from playing so many pinball machines.
Yes.
So, probably a little bit easier to get on board knowing the product so well, knowing the pinball so well. And then
True.
just Keith trusted me and Rick trusted me to put speech in the right place and put shaker motor effects in the right place and do appropriate light shows. So it was just stuff like that to get going. And he had mostly handled the rule set and everything. And Keith comes up with the rule set and he plays it. He gives feedback while he's developing it. And then that game, pretty shortly after, I moved over to the Deadpool project.
Deadpool, another great game. Wow.
Yeah. And that one was a different team. That was Tanyo Kleiss as the lead software developer, and he was in more of the role that a lot of software developers have, where they're coming up with the rule set and implementing it into the game, as well as all the other stuff. So it's very intertwined with, multiple software people are working on a game, and we're working with artists, we're working with sound engineers, we're working with electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, so all sorts of stuff go into it. Deadpool had that awesome real fighting engine in the game, so every time you're playing it, you're getting a different fight scene, which is pretty cool. And it looks like the 90s style of graphics. So
yeah, definitely. It looks like the video game, and then it was so neat because you had the classic Stern pinball machine table, or I call them tables, and people get mad for me. Pinball tables. In the animated graphics, and when they were in like the pool hall or the pinball arcade or whatever, definitely.
Yeah, Deadpool's Lair. He's got some classic Stern games back there.
I think Sea Witch and Flight 2000 make an appearance. I'm not top of my. I mean, I have a Deadpool in my house right now. It's on my patio because it was a game that was out on location because I was doing some location games in Middletown. Of course, that kind of dried up, so we sold off some. I've got 6 games on my patio this summer. Iron Maiden and Deadpool sitting next to each other. So how's that?
That's pretty cool. Yeah. And the other cool thing about going into that is like you feel like you know a lot about pinball, right? You play the games and stuff, but really you just kind of know how the ball bounces and stuff like that. But learning about how talented our artists are, putting together doing pixel art it's not easier than doing any other type of art. It still requires that craftsmanship and that artistic knowledge that I wasn't familiar with. So I rely on those guys a lot at work to do awesome stuff, and they always deliver and they always have the passion.
Who was the game designer of Deadpool?
That was George
That's
Gomez.
What I thought. George Gomez. That was one of Gomez's games. Is that Jeremy Zombietti's art?
Yeah, Zombietti's art package. So he had done Iron Maiden and Deadpool back to back there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and he's really great too. I mean, he always knocks it out of the park.
I mean, all the art on the Stern games lately, sound like I'm buttering you up a little bit. It's all been great. I mean, I love the Franchi art too on like the Batman and the Munsters and some of the games he did. I don't think anything's looked bad lately.
Yeah, it's all been really cool stuff. I'm always impressed to see the stuff that comes through now. And, there's so many people. It's like I want to name everyone who works on all these art packages.
Yeah,
it is a lot of people.
We'll have to get a scroll like the end of the movie here.
Yeah, because I think overall the actual development team at Stern has over 50 people working there.
Okay.
And that's all the disciplines and stuff. And then plus we'll have, contractors come in like the artist to do a certain game or something like that.
Sure.
So we grow and we meet the needs of that. And that's a lot of time. That's the work of Mark Wayna and George Gomez and those people to keep everything on track there. So,
True.
I could just focus on, for the most part, the software stuff, but you're still interacting with those people. And it was great being in the office because we had a great productive environment where you have so
Yeah.
many disciplines there talking to each other that, everyone made these great contributions and you had all this expertise being shared in
It's
the
definitely.
company.
You've been working home now for how long? Is it like 5 months now?
Yeah, it'll be about 5 months, maybe over 5 months now. We started working from home in March. And so jumping ahead, when kind of the reality of the virus kind of set in, and we were seeing it was present, and it was spreading in America and stuff. It was
Yeah.
becoming obvious we'd be working from home, and our executive team was putting together a plan, and I had started working with some of the other software engineers to figure out what stuff we needed to move and how we needed to get our access set up, and working with our IT team, who did a great job getting us accommodated to make the shift over to working from home.
Mm-hmm.
And overall, for me, went pretty well. I think for most people, getting the actual cabinet in here was tough. I was lucky I already had a pinball machine in here, so I had to do some modification to set it up for development.
Yeah.
But other than that, didn't require too much effort to get it in here. And when we need stuff, we can go to work and we can get it. We can get new white woods, and we could get
Okay.
everything we need there set up however we want. But we've done a lot of Zoom meetings. We've done a lot of switching to remote communication. Talking with someone like Steve Ritchie, it's actually probably easier to talk to him now on Slack than it is with because he's hard of hearing too. So I prefer it a little bit, and he's gotten used to it with the text communication.
And so we were working on Deadpool, and we were talking pinball still the last game, the second game, or your first bigger project after the Iron Maiden. So with Deadpool, so if you're finished up with Deadpool, then where did you head from that? What was your third game you were working on?
So after that, Steve Ritchie had been working on his ideas for the next Black Knight game.
Yes.
And this was actually
behind me here.
right behind you there. And this probably started before I was even there. He was in the preliminary stages of working on it, and he was getting to a point where he needed, a new a developer to join the project. And I had been there, and I had been friendly with Steve. Steve's an interesting guy. If you've never seen him, he's got this great history of working in the game industry. He was the voice of Shao Kahn in Mortal Kombat 1 and 2, doing the finish him and other lines like that.
He's got a great play better.
And he'd been working on designing pinball machines since the 70s at Atari, back when they were making pinball machines.
I have the Superman game in my collection.
Yep. And he so in 1980 he made this game called Black Knight, and it was the first game with a split level playfield, upper playfield, I guess.
Yes.
It's a really awesome game. It sold really well, and it featured speech, which was in 1980 just amazing. You had Steve Ritchie doing the voice of the Black Knight character who was taunting you, the player.
Yes.
And it sounded very compressed and monotone by today's standards, but I'm sure back then it was mind-blowing. And it had 4 flippers, it had a 3-ball lock device, a pop bumper on the upper playfield, a bunch of drop targets. It was a fun game.
I mean, it's one of the early games with voice. I mean, Gorgar was the first Williams with voice, and I'm not sure how much longer was Black Knight after Gorgar. I don't have my notes in front of me for that.
Yeah, it must have been pretty.
Were they both the same year? Were they both 80, or was Gorgar 79? I'm not quite sure. Someone will put it in the comments for us, I'm sure. How do you
Yeah.
guys not know that?
I'm not gonna look it up now, but it's online.
I'm not
You
gonna
can
look it up
find it.
either.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're in that same time period. I can remember I had a store back then too. That's how old I am. And I can remember kids coming into my record shop at that time, or smoke shop I had in '79. I think it was '79. Actually, it must have been Gorgar was a '79 game, because that's when I had the store, and they came in. Hey, you got to go across to the arcade in the mall. You know, it was called Just Fun because it's a talking pinball machine now.
Wow.
And then, of course, we probably did go over after we closed the store, and yeah, we used to go to the arcade all the time. Yeah, let's Gorgar. And Gorgar lives on today, but we're talking Black Knight, so I'll let you continue on as I ramble and interrupt you.
Right, and Steve was working at a company called Williams then. It was after Atari closed their pinball. He went over to Williams. And that game did great, and then he went on to make a bunch of other games in the 80s.
Sure.
And in 1989, released a sequel to Black Knight called Black Knight 2000.
Yes.
And it had a lot of the technological advancements that went along with games at the time. So it had a musical soundtrack. Black Knight original didn't really have that.
One of the best sounding games the Black Knight 2000 was with the jingle and then of course his voice booming in over it. Oh.
Yeah, it still holds up.
Yeah, it does.
It's got this hard rocking, driving, really intense 80s soundtrack with like the synth sounds and the choir and everything over top, And people still like get that song stuck in their head and sing it all the time. A lot of people know the Black Knight. So then come to 2019, which is the 30-year anniversary of Black Knight 2000.
Yeah.
Steve has the opportunity to work on a sequel to the sequel. And so he came up with Black Knight Sword of Rage. And it was supposed to be really just like a big leap forward in time where you have, how many? Probably like 100 times more voice call-outs on this one than the previous one. And you had this motorized spinning flail toy in the front that he'd come up with. And
it's amazing, yeah.
The shield that bashed the ball out of the way. And he did the voice acting again, but we also got to do the soundtrack. So we were working on the soundtrack when I started working on the game and what we were going to do with it. Yeah. And we were looking like a couple people have made like covers of Black Knight 2000, and the soundtrack's so iconic. And then I think it was Jody, our director of licensing, who was like, hey, I know this guy Scott Ian from Anthrax that he might be interested in doing something like this. So I had a call with Scott Ian, and we were with me, Jody, and Scott Ian. We were going, what can we? Would you be interested in doing the soundtrack for the next Black Knight game? And he's like, sure, send me some stuff from the last one. I've got a little bit of time in like January, February. I can hammer it out.
Mm-hmm.
So we're like, okay, this sounds like a good plan. We sent it over to him, and he was on tour, I think with Slayer and some other bands. You might remember that tour at the end of 2019.
It was probably part of the Slayer farewell, which was Slayer, Lamb of God, Anthrax, and Testament, and Behemoth, the one leg. There was all different legs, but Anthrax was on that first couple legs, I believe, yeah. Yeah,
so whenever we called him, he was somewhere in Arkansas when he was on that tour. Okay. He had just been, hitting city after city after city, and he's like, I could do this, I just don't have time right now. But we're like, okay, the game doesn't come out till March, April, so like it would fit like right under the gun. And so we had been like, crossing our fingers for that. And then one day, I think I woke up and started driving to work, and Jody calls me, and he's like, you have to hear this. This is the best thing I've ever heard. And he's like, I got to send this to you. How do I send it to you? And he sends me this Dropbox link. And my email popped up, and I like was able to open it on my phone. And I just have like on my car speakers, I hear the new Black Knight theme that Scott Ian and he actually had Brendan Small of Death Clock
Yeah,
help him
Brandon
out.
Small, yeah, sure.
Yeah, he did like the solos and the drum programming and stuff, and he just hit us with this awesome like soundtrack. And I get into work and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I go around to everyone. And there's a lot of, people who love rock music at Stern. You can imagine we've
Yeah,
got
yeah.
Steve, who used to play guitar till his hearing went, of course. John Borg plays guitar. Mark Wayne plays guitar. Jody has guitar. There's more guitars than pinball machines at Stern, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, Gary's partner, Dave, is a big guitar guy. He came from that business too. So it
Well,
goes all the way up.
Yeah, Jody came from that business also. That's how he
Yeah.
knows all the bands, because I've crossed over with Jody, and he knows a lot of people from the heavy metal industry and rock and roll. Now, you had another rock and roll person on Black Knight too, not from a metal band, but Bare Naked Ladies, right?
Right. Yeah. We had Ed Robertson, he's a massive pinball fan. I mean,
Yeah.
he'll just come to town to hang out with us if he could, I think. But, he's very successful with his music career,
Yeah.
and he's made music videos with his whole pinball collection behind him, and he's done songs about pinball and stuff. He loves pinball.
Yeah.
And Steve and him had become friends, and I was introduced to Ed that way, and he was talking about doing one of the voices on Black Knight. And so Steve had created this cast of skeleton characters.
Yes.
They all had these clever names, and Ed's character was going to be Bernie, who was he was a skeleton who wielded a flamethrower, and you could see him come up on the screen every time you hit a spinner. And one of our artists, Denai, he actually put the concept together, and it's awesome. You've got the skeleton with like this big barrel of kerosene on his back. He's got these two little half skeletons, like pumping to make this medieval flamethrower thing sort of work.
Yeah, the graphics on that display are just amazing in Black Knight.
Yeah, it was awesome to have that kind of freedom to create this, like, visualize the Black Knight's world. I think that's what we did. It's the Black Knight, but he also has this world he lives in. So we've got this army of skeletons he commands around. Some of them had voice lines and stuff, and they're in the multi-balls. He's got these castles. There's all these different lands with these different monsters in this corrupted world that the Black Knight runs.
It's very heavy metal. It could be
awesome.
the most heavy metal pinball machine that Stern's made, but we can't leave out Iron Maiden and Metallica and Kiss.
It's been a great decade of heavy metal games.
Yeah, it has. But it's just the graphics and everything on Black Knight. It'll just suck in. And one thing I don't have that I was looking to purchase before the pandemic started was that topper. The topper is just off the hook.
Yeah, I have heard a lot of great things. Well, it's hard. We've had our difficulties at Stern, of course, with the shutdown too. Being an American factory. When Illinois shuts down, it's held up our production, and it has caused some delays. And one of those delays was with getting toppers out to people. But I know the company's working on doing everything they can to catch up on orders. So that
topper from Black Knight is still something that can be manufactured and still will be available.
Yeah, it's still in production now, and I know we've got some orders in, so we're still working on them.
I really need to get that one day. Hopefully we start making enough money in the record shop and the smoke shop to actually afford such things. At the moment, it's a little tight, but yeah, it's amazing though. You taking a job of something you were passionate about, and now being part of your whole life, and being able to work with some of the guys that you were, just kind of looking up to while you were, playing competitively, at Bill Disney's place or my places, and some of the big tournaments that you've played, and Papa and whatever else.
Yeah. And one other thing I want to say about Black Knight is, so going into that with Steve as like the lead game developer, kind of learning about, there's so many people that work on the games now, and interfacing with dozens of people to work on this project. Like, you get the title of lead developer, but you're really just stitching together a group of really hardworking people on the game. So I want to, give a shout out to everyone on the art teams, everyone on the mechanical teams, everyone on the electrical teams, everyone in production for actually putting the games together and putting them in boxes, everyone on the software team. And, we do try to put in like the full list of everyone who contributed to the game.
Yes.
If you put the flipper code in to get the credits to come up. So check it out if you really want to see everyone who worked on it. Also, some of the reveal streams that our company puts out on YouTube with Jack Danger. You could see a huge group of people filling the room, and that's everyone who worked on the game. So just want to give credit to everyone who worked on it. It wasn't just
Excellent.
me.
Well, Deadpool too, of course, right?
Right, yeah. Deadpool, a huge team.
So those were the two main games that you put a lot of work in, and now, and what you're probably currently working on a game that we can't talk about today. And since after Black Knight, that was it until the current time of what you're in process with, or no?
So, well, at Stern, actually, I do get the opportunity to kind of help out with stuff. So there's just been little things here and there that we all do. But I've had, I'm happy to say that I've had a tiny little piece in Jurassic Park. I did
Jurassic
a lot of.
Park's another amazing game.
Yeah, and I got a chance to do a lot of the premium, like T-Rex shaker motor effects. And I was sitting there like timing it out where every time the T-Rex stomps on the screen, you could feel the whole game shake. So just trying to put little touches like that in the games, having like a week to do that. I've just had opportunities like that.
I literally just updated the code in my Jurassic Park premium today.
It's a great game. A lot of fun.
It's
Stranger Things I got to work to with Brian and Lonnie and
another strong
Rubin there.
license.
Yep, another great game. Worked on some of those Demogorgons and some of the episode modes or the chapter modes of that
like
game.
For a while, you were only hearing about Stern only does old stuff, and then you do Stranger Things, which is very current. So and Deadpool, which is very current. Once in a while, and then everybody, Pinside or whatever. Of course, they're going to complain like any other media source, right?
Well, yeah, what's funny, going back to the 3 Cornerstone games, usually across those 3 games, we have a variety of themes we do, but we only release one of them at a time. So if we release a theme that someone might not be into, some people will post online about it, but usually a couple months later, we're going to do another game that's completely different, and it's going to be, bring a whole new audience of people into it.
Like you only make games for boomers like me, right? But the Black Knight, one interesting thing about Black Knight was the first game. We're not saying it's unlicensed because it was licensed, but the first game that was done in a long time that wasn't to do with a movie or motion picture or a band or music group.
Yeah, it was still a licensed game, but yeah, you're right. It was distinct from a lot of the other games where it wasn't part of the usual repertoire of the top IP that we're known for doing.
Exactly,
But it brought some variety into it. But even now I see like Black Knight, and I feel like Elvira too is kind of a game where you have a lot of we had a lot of B-movie clips and stuff, and it's not known as like this top blockbuster superstar license or something, but it's still like
it's like Elvira can almost cross where it's like a pinball remake along with a person that's famous,
Yeah, it's in that
like Elvira
vein of classic Stern
hasn't done any motion pictures or anything in a while, and I remember her more from the 80s or maybe early 90s of doing stuff. But that's the continuation of the Elvira pinball series. Of course, Party Monsters and Scared Stiff, and another guy. That's why I bought it, because I love the B movie. It kind of fits in the atmosphere of my store. I got it in a slot next to Party Monsters, next to Creature from the Black Lagoon, next to Adams, and then we go to Monsters. So we've got all the monster themes in that row, in that hall. So
and that one's also great because it's the first time you could see Elvira, actually on the screen doing her sort of thing.
With the new screens and like a little television, it's just great what the stuff you can do with pinball now.
Yeah, it really draws people in, I think. I think when people see the LCD games, they they feel like, oh, this is contemporary. This is like a new
Did
thing.
you do a little work on the Elvira also?
No, I didn't do anything with Elvira, but
Or Turtles?
Turtles, only internal stuff, really nothing that
Okay.
contributed to the game. But
And
I
that
mean,
was,
you're around, the
yeah,
chance.
yeah,
We have
yeah.
such a big team that a chance will come up that you might be able to work on something. But
And
and we're always looking, like we always have, of course, we always have future development planned out. So a lot of the time when you're working on something, it's probably not something that's been released yet. It's just the nature of how it works. You work on something for a while,
mhm.
90% of the time at least is going to be before the game's released for everyone to see it, because you don't want to show something before it's done. And
Excellent.
people always ask about the games that have already come out, if I'm working on them. But just generally, we have a rolling cycle of all these game releases to hit, those 3 cornerstone games a year, and our
Yeah.
plan and meet the demand of the global pinball audience, because we ship domestically and internationally to a pretty huge variety of countries that all
And of
buy
course,
pinball
Stern does
machines.
put out more than those 3 cornerstone games in a year, because you'll do some private, like, I don't, what do we call it? Private games? Like you made a Primus game, whether it's 100 games. So you'll find a band or a brand like Pat's Blue Ribbon, or someone will say, we want a pinball machine. And you guys will do, a limited run on what you call, what is that, like a specialty game? Or is that, what's the official term for that, I guess?
So we have 2 other types of games we do. We do studio titles, which are titles that aren't necessarily completely developed in-house.
Okay.
And that would be like an Elvira or Beatles, which we did.
And Batman 66 was what, Kapow?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Batman 66. And then we also do the private label business, which is where we work with, some really high-powered brands to bring them a pinball product to add, if they want to add it to their accessory line or however they want to do it. So it gives us more avenues, and it always reaches more people. Every time you do a new pinball machine like that, it creates a stir. I remember when I first got to Stern, I saw for the first time the Supreme pinball machine. And
Oh
a lot
yeah,
of
that
my
was one of them.
coworkers weren't familiar with the brand, but as a young person, I was really familiar with the brand. And
Yeah,
a little bit later, it launched, and you got like 2 million views in 24 hours for the launch video just on the Supreme pinball machine.
crazy, isn't it?
And they have an audience of a lot of younger people too, so that brings like a whole new audience of people like, oh, this is cool, brand
It's a
new
pinball,
Supreme
yeah,
game.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's
And
cool to
I,
see how all those worlds work together.
and that was an expensive game if you wanted to buy it.
Yeah. It's it's hard to get. That's for sure.
There was a guy, I'll tell you a little story about that quickly. I moved my store. There's a store that opened around the corner here in downtown Middletown selling skateboards, and the whole thing is Supreme. So the guy came into my store one day, left his phone number. Would I be interested in a Supreme pinball? He claims that they got one because they work with the company or something. I said, well, let me know the price. And, he didn't really follow through then. I was kind of hoping the guy was like, yeah, we got it, give it to us and I'll sell it to you cheaper. I even said, hey, if you want to put it in my shop or in the pinball showroom, it would be, we could even have it in there and display for a little while. Nothing came of it. Of course, then the pandemic came. It wasn't like February and I got to talk to this guy, but there's a Supreme pinball somewhere in Middletown, still in the box, I think, somewhere, according to him.
Yeah, well, Keith and I used to play that at work, and we'd battle each other to see who could get the highest score. He wound up winning that competition, but sometimes I try to sneak out into the arcade and set some grand champion scores before he notices. But pretty soon
Okay.
he always notices and starts taking my scores back
So
down.
similar to what we used to do here at Rock Fantasy, because
Right,
we'd have like
exactly.
Frank Romero or Jerry Sabb, or you would be in a war. Then maybe once in a while, when when we had the big tournament, Zen or some of the other Greg Poverelli or these guys would come in and try to take down those scores. This is something that you're going. You have a little arcade set up right in Stern, right? So you can some of your titles and games that you're working on and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we have our arcade. We're actually required at work to play 15 minutes a day
that's
of
cool.
pinball. And Gary doesn't hesitate to remind us that we need to be playing our 15 minutes every day because he's like, you can work at any company, but if you work in pinball, you gotta love pinball. You gotta play pinball.
Keith
It's
Owen.
fun. It's supposed
Keith
to be
Owen.
fun, and if it's not fun, what's the point of this?
And if Keith's playing, that's got what's that, like one ball, 15 minutes?
Yeah, that's the problem too. Is like I can play one game for 15 minutes, and Keith can play one ball for 15 minutes,
Yeah.
and
Then depends
you
on
kind of
the right?
load up on all your break time at the beginning of the week, trying to take
So
down a high score.
another thing that you've been involved with is the revival of the pinball tournaments being brought back into New York City. At the
That's
Sky,
right.
it was at the Skyline Hotel. Now, how many years have they had the New York City Pinball Championships now? Was there two so far? This would have been the third this year.
Yeah, this would have been the third one in May. We canceled it, I guess, for the year.
Well,
It's postponed
obviously.
until we see how things are looking. But I had started working on this actually before anything happened with Stern. And just
Okay.
up in Poughkeepsie, I had been talking to Levy and Paul.
Paul Karras.
Yeah, about Levy would always talk about, like what the heck? Because living in Poughkeepsie or living in Middletown, you're in the New York City metropolitan area, which is the largest metropolitan area in the United States. It's something like 20
Sure.
million people live,
Yep.
90 miles from New York City. So it's huge.
Yep.
And we were talking about how he's like, why are we always going to these hotels at the side of the highway and these small cities outside of like the biggest city on earth to go play in these pinball tournaments? It doesn't make any sense. Everyone's here. Everyone's traveling out of here. We should do a tournament of pinball in New York City and really embrace it being in New York City. And so
Yeah.
we looked into it, and we understood like the price would be higher. Obviously, it's cheaper to get the Hyatt off the side of the turnpike to
Sure.
host
Yeah,
your event than
for the
a
rent.
hotel in
Yeah.
Manhattan. But we were upfront about, hey, it's going to be a little more expensive. It's going to be in the city. We got to deal with the hotel to get a couple room blocks that we were able to sell to some people. We were in the
Yeah.
Hell's Kitchen neighborhood, so it wasn't the most crazy expensive part of the city, but
Yeah.
we sold it as, hey, it's a pinball tournament and an experience in a great city. You can walk outside, go get food,
Sure.
go to the street festival, where they have the food festival every year at 9th Avenue at the same weekend.
Okay.
And so we talked about it. We said, oh, it looks feasible, and we ran it. We got this room at the Skyline Hotel. It was the penthouse ballroom. Wasn't the
Yes.
biggest space, but it had a beautiful skyline view, all these windows around.
Yes.
And
I remember it well.
a lot of people came. It was really popular. And we put a lot of work into it. It was really difficult, actually, that first year, getting all the machines and moving them and setting up and everything.
You had Eddie Kramer working like a dog. I remember.
Oh, yeah. We had Eddie Kramer. We had
One of the people.
Al helping out with his games, and
Yeah.
Levy was using his games, and Austin. Austin was brought into the fold as a member of the organization, and he donated a lot of his games.
Austin. What last
Austin
name?
Smith.
Okay. Yeah.
And he had a lot of in the games in the classics tournament. So yeah, Eddie was working like crazy, keeping that running and everything. We had a lot of help. But everyone who was there gave us great feedback. They said, didn't matter how bad a ball you played, you turned around, you saw that beautiful view and everything, and
Yeah.
you're like, oh, this is great.
I think Howard had brought Project Pinball in on it too, right? Did some
Right, we
Project
did that
Pinball and
charity
Howard was
auction. That's been
Yeah.
very successful the past couple of years, bringing Project Pinball in.
Now the second year, you were no longer in the penthouse. You were downstairs in a bigger room, correct?
Right, so they had a larger room that was more expensive, of course, and it didn't have the great view, but it had a lot more space.
Yes.
So we upped it to 200 competitors the second year
Yeah.
in the tournament, and we did it over the three. We had the classics, the open division with the A and the B skill divisions, and we have the women's division, which we named the Dahlia Rowan Memorial Division that year to dedicate it to such a great
Dahlia was a great person in pinball, and what a great friend to Rock Fantasy and, you know, the New York City pinball community also.
Yeah, she was amazing. So we thought it was extremely appropriate to you know, do what we could to dedicate that tournament to her. And the amazing legacy she left so many good memories with everyone. She made everyone
A very positive force.
right feel great. She did the kids' birthday parties at Modern. I'm sure, you know, lots of kids had great experiences getting into pinball there. So
they were always very welcoming. When I first, after I did the Special and Lit documentary, that's how I met a lot of, you know, people from pinball. How I met Eddie and Dahlia, and they made me feel like a rock star. They came up to me in Allentown. We have a picture, you know, this and that, like Eddie and Dahlia, and like, hey, I'm just, you know, regular guy. But I remember, like, when everybody first came to my house here where I'm filming tonight for one of our, like, 4th of July pinball tournaments, like Chief Tawaka tournament, we call it. And everybody came here, and they were a lot of the people from the city all stayed at their lake house in Greenwood Lake that weekend, like Francesco and Alberto. And I can't, you know, I don't want to leave anybody out, but the pinball crew that came up from the city. I think Joe Sayed was at my first one. I don't know if you were here yet.
I don't think I was. No, that was before I even started playing pinball. I started playing about 2013.
And that weekend that you ran the New York City Pinball Championship, the second year was a busy weekend for me because I was doing a promotion with Eddie Munster, with Butch Patrick, with the Munsters pinball, and I had it over at the Meadowlands Comic Con. And I dropped it off there, and I remember dropping off the pinball, hanging out there for a while, and then driving into the city to visit you guys, and played a couple rounds in the New York City Pinball Championships. And then from there, I drove to Coney Island. I don't know if that was all the same night or the next night. Coney Island Freak Show as a pinball room.
Oh, right.
Tournament that weekend. And actually, Francesco was at that tournament with us. And I don't know if he didn't get in on the list with you guys or something, but Francesco was there. And we were in Coney Island at like 1, 2 in the morning. Well, that was a fun experience. But it was a long weekend because then Sunday I had to drive back to pick up the Munsters game and get it out of the Meadowlands, bring it back to my store. Then we had Butch Patrick in my store on Monday evening, called Munster Monday, we called it, and you could actually meet Butch Patrick and play the pinball, and he did autographs, signed the game, signed some Mylars and whatnot, and then we had him bowling at the bowling alley in town, which I had games set up at. So it was a long weekend for me.
Mm-hmm.
One weekend.
Yeah, it's always a long weekend for me too, but that's because I'm not playing in the tournament. I'm just trying to make sure everything runs smoothly.
So you didn't
but it's worth it. No, I haven't played in any of them that we've run, but we've had great feedback every year. You know, we need, you know, the staff there at least to keep things running smoothly and everything.
Well, let's just hope that by May of next year, things have calmed down enough with this virus and everything that we'll be back playing some pinball.
Yeah, we could hope. At this point, you know, it's, you know, it is what it is. We're just going to see what happens. Right. IFPA has taken the step to stop sanctioning tournaments for a while, so there's no pressure at least on to.
Same thing, you know, with all our great conventions we go to in the pinball world, the Pintastic and Allentown Pin Wizards and.
Yeah, I think they're doing an all online Comic-Con. The San Diego Comic-Con's all this weekend.
Oh,
it's online only.
And at San Diego Comic-Con, usually Stern has a big presence there.
We do, yeah, and we're actually gonna do, you know, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with Jack Danger broadcasting live as part of the official Comic-Con.
You're usually there with another heavy metal connection. You were usually in the Nuclear Blast America booth.
Yeah, that's where we sold our limited edition vinyl records.
I finally got one last year, but yeah, I couldn't go unless I got in a plane and went to San Diego, so that wasn't happening. But I think
they sold out real quick.
You had Kerry King there from Slayer.
Yeah.
And he's also a pinball aficionado, I heard, and has some games in his house. I know that Chuck Billy from Testament is big into pinball too. I don't know if he has any in the house, but I've been doing this interview series. You're the only pinball guy. Actually, we did Dan Spoler. We did a Project Pinball with a moto, and even Dr. Hoffman from our local hospital in Howard couple weeks ago, but you're my second pinball episode. So, I actually talked with Jeremy from the artist Zombie Eddie. And he wants to come on and do something soon. He was working on a project. He said he'd be done soon. So
He's got a great sense of humor, Jeremy. You'll have a lot of fun.
And he does a lot of rock and roll posters too.
He does. I've actually got his Primus poster signed right here.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Because I got to meet him at Fantastic one summer. He was a guest up there with Gabe. Gabe always was bringing in really cool guests from Stern and artists and whatnot. And you were a guest there too.
Yeah, I did a talk last year at the Fantastic show, and Steve was there as well.
Yeah, Steve I met twice. I tried to give him a Rock Fantasy shirt, and I didn't realize he only wears plain black shirts. Yeah.
Only wears, black, mostly long sleeve, black jeans, black shoes, black socks, and then a big, huge gold watch on his arm.
Yeah, he's the Black Knight. Is there anything else you'd like to add tonight?
So let me think. So check out Rock Fantasy. Shop at Rock Fantasy online.
Buy Stern pinballs from Stern Pinball.
Yeah, buy Stern pinballs from Stern Pinball. Check out the online stuff we've been putting out, at least on our social media, our Stern Pinball social media. I'll promote that. We have a map of where you can actually play the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game in your region. We've been putting stuff like that together. So I think Rock Fantasy's on there.
It is, and it's just a tricky time now because you don't know like who's open for pinball, who's allowed to have pinball, and like what states. Some, like you said, in Chicago, some of the bars were opening, so probably could have played, and now you're saying that they might start shutting them down, and that's in New York City the same thing now.
Yeah, obviously safety's got to be your first concern, but I think there are safe ways to play pinball, if you could keep your distance and
I believe so.
Keep your masks on and
no
keep it
different
clean.
Than getting gas at the gas station or touching produce in the grocery store. Just wash your hands after you play the game, or use some sanitizer and keep your distance. The main thing I think right now.
Yeah, absolutely, and it'll be good times coming out of this. I'm sure we'll all be back at the New York City Pinball Championship 3 whenever that happens.
Or even just being able to go to your local bar or your local pincade or whatever you want to call it nowadays, and being able to have a sandwich and a beer and play some pinball with your friends would be just a great victory right now, right?
It'll be great, but I think I'm optimistic for the future. I think we'll be through this. We'll be stronger. Of course, as a country, and our businesses will all come back. I'm optimistic.
Good.
And I hope that everyone gets the support they need at this time when times are rough, and we can all look forward to a future where this is behind us.
Thanks for it's going to be a hell of a party when we can look, we couldn't even go to the Orange County Fair, Tim. Me and Tim went to the Orange County Fair one day when the Star Wars pinball was released, and Tim, before he worked at Stern, actually had a video blog, sort of like I'm doing, where he would teach you how to play pinball, pointers, debut new games, stream a lot of games. He streamed a lot of games from Rock Fantasy, which was nice. And we actually went to the fairgrounds here in Middletown, and there was a Star Wars themed like orbiter ride or graviton ride, right?
Right, one of those that spin you around and you kind of fly up the sidewalls.
Yeah, and it was me, you, and Stephanie, who does a pinball podcast too. What's the name of her podcast? It's flipping my mind right now.
You put me on the spot now too.
Now I threw you into the
fire. Riptide Pinball Podcast.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So anyhow, Stephanie, we were all walking around the fair. We did the demolition derby that night, I think, and we were having a good time. And we shot the whole intro to your video. I was like, Tim, will you find out how to play like the code? I could figure it out because it was kind of complicated when it first came out. So you guys,
it was a big game.
You went through the ride, and we kind of used it as a gimmick. Like, hey, did you figure out? Did you talk to Yoda?
Yeah, Yoda was in the ride, and he used his force powers to help me learn the rule set.
Yeah.
But it was Star Wars. You had to do a big game. I mean, it's one of the most iconic IPs that's out there. So you've
Yes.
got all these great characters and everything. It's a fun
That
game.
was
And
right around, probably right before we did the launch. Then you had to take on Obi-Wan Kenobi, Steve Bowden.
yeah,
2000, right?
and he won the launch party.
I think
And now
did
he's down in Texas. So all the regulars from Rock Fantasy been leaving to
Everyone's
work on
leaving
pinball.
now, except Frank Romero. He hasn't gotten a job with any of the pinball companies as of yet.
Oh, well. Hopefully, with continued growth, there'll be room for more
Frank.
expansion. Yeah.
The towel's still off though.
Oh no. So he's not back yet.
Serious yet till when the towel goes back.
When the towel comes back on, yeah.
Pinball type T-shirt comes back on. He says, "Then it's time to go. Time for serious." Well, thanks for watching tonight, and
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
please subscribe to my channel. Hit subscribe, hit like, comment on a little bit, and share it around. And hopefully we'll get some more pinball folk on the Rock Fantasy File soon. All right. Thanks everyone, and have a great night. Anything you want to add? SternPinball.com. Go buy some swag. They got T-shirts. They got hats. They got toppers. Got all that good stuff.
We got masks. Buy masks. Got Rock Fantasy. Got masks from Stern Pinball. Yeah.
Turn strong. Yeah. Play strong, right?
Play strong.
All right. Thanks for coming on.